It is official. Penn State versus Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl. Notre Dame knocks off Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. Of course, this is going to be a tough matchup. It's the final four teams in college football this season, but this one against Notre Dame, it's definitely a winnable one for Penn State.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Zach Seyko. I am your host of the show. This is a live show, so bring your thoughts, bring your comments as we are talking Penn State versus Notre Dame. Just initial thoughts based on the result against Georgia, what I like about Notre Dame, what certainly is going to play the biggest part in this matchup against the Nittany Lions, and so much more. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay, so that's exactly how it played out, or at least how I thought it was going to play out. Notre Dame was going to win. Notre Dame was going to win comfortably against Georgia. And part of that is, yes, this is not the same Georgia team that we have become accustomed to over the past few seasons, that perennial national title contender. This is more than just going from Carson Beck to Gunnar Stockton. Georgia had some other systematic issues that I would have liked more in a Penn State versus Georgia matchup than a Penn State versus Notre Dame. But Penn State, is probably just happy to be in the Orange Bowl. It doesn't matter who they were going to face. But now, actually talking about this, I mean, Notre Dame is a top 5 defense. Objectively, statistically, they have star power, even though they are without some of their better players going into this, or one interior defensive lineman, that superstar player for them. But Notre Dame still looked and had the exact feel of a top 5 defense against Georgia. And I know that Georgia has its offensive struggles, but that's still an SEC team. And going from Carson Beck to Gunnar Stockton, there is a drop off. Don't get me wrong, because Beck would have been a 2-year starter, right? It's supposed to be an NFL quarterback. The jury is out on how good Gunnar Stockton is, because I know that's going to be the concern, is how much credit is Notre Dame due against a Georgia team. Honestly, the same thing could be said about Penn State and Boise State, and the same thing is being said, and I don't look at it that way. Just because other people are saying it doesn't mean that I agree with it. I think that Notre Dame had a hard-fought victory, but they rely on great defense, elite defense, a ground game that involves quarterback Riley Leonard and somebody who is a cerebral player that has seen a lot of college football in that same player in Leonard. So this is a team that does not make mistakes. You cannot trick them. They are disciplined. Other teams, hey, you can run it. SMU, for example, Kevin Jennings is a first-year starter. Tom Allen had his way because it is easy to draw up schemes that will confuse Jennings in the SMU offense. But for Notre Dame, you don't get that same luxury. You're going to have to do different things to try to throw off Riley Leonard. And unfortunately for Penn State, why I think this is a winnable matchup is because this is a lot of strength on strength. Penn State, quality, cerebral quarterback. I won't necessarily say that Drew Aller is the dual threat to the capability of Riley Leonard, but Drew Aller can run. Riley Leonard can run. Both of these guys are not easily, you can't just run a defensive scheme and hope to trick them. You really have to bring your A game defensively when it comes to your game plan. And then they have an amazing backfield. I mean, Notre Dame's backfield is comparable, right? The best teams of the best teams do not make it this far without the backfield that they have. Am I going to sit here and say that Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen are behind Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and Aeneas Williams? But it's the fact that Notre Dame does have more running backs that they can turn to. Jeremiah Love goes down in that Sugar Bowl game against Georgia, and there's not too much of a drop off there to Jadarian Price. And then the fact that they trust a third running back in Aeneas Williams, that's something that Penn State is missing. They had Cam Wallace. Cam Wallace suffered an injury, but fortunately for Penn State, you see how much running back depth matters. Because for Notre Dame, it is the Jeremiah Love show next to Riley Leonard. Whereas it's a 1-2 punch for Penn State with Singleton and Allen, but there's clearly a pecking order in the backfield for Notre Dame. But those are still any of those guys could start. If Jeremiah Love was not in the picture, they could go with Jadarian Price. If Jadarian Price was not in the picture, they could go with Aeneas Williams. So it's the fact that they have depth and they have quality depth, and then you have to take into account, okay, Jeremiah Love most likely will get the football, but here's Riley Leonard who can keep it. I mean, he's the second leading rusher on this team. And he also has before going into this game, these are statistics prior to the Sugar Bowl, but Leonard has seven fewer carries than their number one running back, and one fewer touchdown as well. 16 rushing touchdowns to 15 rushing touchdowns for Jeremiah Love to Riley Leonard. Like I said, Riley Leonard does not make a lot of mistakes. Smart quarterback. A bunch of different wide receivers to throw to, but I have a hard time saying, hey, is Notre Dame's wide receiver room better or is it Penn State's? But if we're talking overall pass catchers, then it is Penn State's. Tyler Warren, Trey Wallace, saw some good play out of Amari Evans in that game against Boise State. I do like what Notre Dame has. This is why we are at the Final Four. There are not many things that I can pick out and say this is a flaw or this is a problem with Notre Dame. It's either going to be a strength or it's going to be something that's not as strong, if you will, right? There's really no weak links at this point. It's just which one is not the strongest. And if I look at Notre Dame's pass catchers, that is the case. That's not the strongest link on this team, but they don't need it to be because of Leonard's dual threat ability, because of a three-man backfield for Notre Dame, because of good coordinators on both sides. We haven't even gotten to the fact that there is the Penn State connection here with Al Golden as the defensive coordinator. This one is going to be somewhat personal for him in the Orange Bowl. But when I look at these receivers, Jordan Faison is the first player that I think you need to know about. Mitchell Evans, the tight end for Notre Dame as well. He's healthy and he's just a talented player. The statistics aren't going to show it, but it's someone that Penn State is going to have to account for. He is an athletic mismatch. And at 6'5", 260 pounds in Mitchell Evans, that's going to be a tall task for whomever is going to cover him. If that is Dom DeLuca, if that is Tony Rojas, if that is Kobe King, because Evans doesn't win his matchups with speed, because I think Tony Rojas is going to be much more athletic than him in a speed race, but it's that size, it's that ability to box out defenders and use your size to maximize your ability in pass catching situations. So Notre Dame is a team that likes to play disciplined football. This isn't an air raid team. This isn't a big play team. They like to sustain drives, control the football, and rely on that top five defense. So when I look at this Orange Bowl, don't look at it as, well, Penn State and Notre Dame are going to get into a shootout. Could they? Certainly they could, but I think this is going to be a defensive struggle all the way because of the way that Notre Dame operates and because all the marbles are on the line. For Penn State and Notre Dame, rarely do you see these types of games at any level, NFL, high school, college football, with what we're talking about. When two teams get to this point in a winner-take-all situation, you will not see teams take these active risks. And Penn State is going to want explosive plays, but they're going to be a little more selective. And with the way that Notre Dame operates, where they just get, a little bit of chunk plays, little chunk plays, and control the pace of the game, control time of possession. Notre Dame likes to have the same set of goals that Penn State does. Control time of possession, win the turnover battle, win the explosive play battles. It might not be outlined like that, but Marcus Freeman and James Franklin operate from a similar type of blueprint here. So for Penn State, this is a winnable matchup because Notre Dame is not overly dominant in the passing game. Penn State's kryptonite is a team built like Ohio State where they have multiple different receiving options to go to. And I know Oregon got knocked out the way they did in the Rose Bowl, but that's still a team that that Penn State does not match up well with. Penn State matches up well with Notre Dame because it's a lot of strength on strength. This is an even matchup, and I think the initial spread for Penn State versus Notre Dame per our friends over at FanDuel was 1 point. Notre Dame was a 1-point favorite. There we go. It's updated. So we'll talk about it more in the ad read here. But Penn State is a 1.5-point underdog at the open here against the Fighting Irish. This is going to be a close game. It's going to be a physical game. Notre Dame certainly got beat up in that Georgia game. So did Penn State against Boise State. We're going to talk about Abdul Carter. We're going to get your questions and comments. But I like this matchup a lot. I'm not saying that I wouldn't have been invested in Penn State versus Georgia, but there is certainly a lot more to like about Penn State versus Notre Dame than it would have been hypothetically with Penn State versus Georgia. I think at the end of the day, a win is all that matters. And Notre Dame poses a tougher challenge than what Georgia. And that's why I said on a recent live stream that I'm confident Notre Dame wins and I'm confident they win convincingly. Does Georgia have a chance? Absolutely. But there are a lot of good things about Notre Dame that got them there. Do not let that Northern Illinois game define this Fighting Irish team. This was always going to be a team that was going to get better down the stretch. They didn't let the loss to the MAC team define them. It was fun to use as a bludgeon, as a reason as to why they couldn't be ranked above Penn State. But I never looked at that Notre Dame team aside from that and said, you know what, this is a legitimate college football playoff contender and somebody that could end up in the semifinal. And here we are, maybe even the championship. Ohio State seems to have it locked down, but I am not going to count out Texas. But we're going to get your thoughts, your comments in this conversation as well and talk about all of this more. Penn State versus Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl. More of that is coming on the way next. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, and there's still time to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. You can bet on which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and passing yards, rushing yards, receiving yards, all that and so much more over at FanDuel. And like I alluded to, if we look at the lines over on FanDuel.com, you can see them now for Penn State versus Notre Dame. Notre Dame is a 1.5-point favorite presently. Money line -122 for Penn State plus 102. The total is set at 44.5, alluding to a lower scoring game. If you like those lines, you can bet them over at FanDuel.com. And remember, you will have a chance at $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Again, that is FanDuel. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Forever grateful for all the support on this channel. Thank you so much for joining the live show here. Penn State versus Notre Dame. First thoughts, initial thoughts here. Let's get some of yours. Penn State must play smart, no personal fouls, be prepared for Notre Dame. Special teams, contain Leonard's running. Yes, you have to absolutely account for the dual threat ability of Riley Leonard. If I could compare this game or this team, the way that this matches up, I won't go as far as the wide receivers. Obviously, Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka and Carnell Tate are different for Ohio State, but I think of the fact, hey, Will Howard is a dual threat quarterback. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He can read a defense. You know, having Chip Kelly, having Dem Brock as an offensive coordinator for Riley Leonard. But I compare all those two things. Riley Leonard is like Will Howard, Jeremiah Love, and all those other running. Notre Dame just has running back depth, quality running back depth, because I can't say, oh, it's like Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. Those guys, I think, are on a different level. But Jeremiah Love's on that level. I don't know about Jadarian Price and Aeneas Williams, but it's the fact that they have running back depth and guys that they trust absolutely wholeheartedly in that backfield. So Will Howard, Riley Leonard, not a lot of differences. Jeremiah Love in that backfield, not a lot of differences from the fact that Ohio State has those kind of has that luxury in the depth chart for themselves. So Notre Dame is comparable to that matchup that Penn State faced against Ohio State, sans Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka. There we go. So alluded to it. How much credit should Notre Dame get? Because Georgia is not that good. This is a team that got smacked by Ole Miss and nearly knocked off by Georgia Tech. Every game is subjective. I don't let one performance define a team, because then if that was the case, Notre Dame wouldn't be at this point because of that Northern Illinois game. And honestly, for Penn State, they shouldn't have struggled as much against Bowling Green, but every game is unique. And that is still a tough, physical Georgia team. They made it to the college football playoff. They beat Texas twice, the team that is in the semifinal, Carson back, not having Carson back 100%, going with Gunnar Stockton, I get that, but Georgia would still defeat a good half of these other teams in the college football playoffs. So Notre Dame absolutely deserves a ton of credit. And guys got banged up, right? That you really got to be tough as nails to make it through a Georgia team, even though this isn't traditionally the ones that we know as, hey, that's a national title contender and don't question it otherwise. Penn State's line better get better versus the blitz because Notre Dame is a very good blitzing team. And that is without one of its better defenders on the defensive line. And they get organic pressure. Al Golden is able to queue up different types of blitzes. But yes, if I am Notre Dame, I am looking at that film against Penn State for Penn State versus Boise State. And really, the Broncos got home. Whether it was Drew Shelton, Nick Dawkins, primarily the interior of the offensive line, I don't know if those were communication issues, but very uncharacteristic for Penn State because they've been better in pass protection than they have run blocking. And it's like the script flipped. Now, pass protection had become somewhat of an issue, and they were dominant in the ground game. So Penn State's issue in terms of one-on-one, Penn State's offensive line is doing well. Penn State's offensive line has not been playing. They've been playing their best football to this point in time. Nolan Rucci is grading out as one of the best overall offensive linemen per Pro Football Focus. That was something I pointed out earlier over on X. I said that, hey, Penn State and Phil Trautwein just unlocked Nolan Rucci's 5-star potential as this team is in the postseason. Losing Anthony Donko, that was one of my biggest concerns, and now Nolan Rucci is playing to that five-star level, and it's backed up by the data, by the analytics. To be honest, Penn State looks like the better team, and that's why I give them a winning chance. With or without Abdul Carter, I think this team, I will have more. This is, like I said, this is kind of the initial reaction. I'm going to have more to go through everything. But Notre Dame and Penn State, this couldn't be a closer matchup. Strength on strength in a lot of categories. They're very similar teams. But I think Drew Allar's a better quarterback than Riley Leonard. I think Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen as a tandem are better than Jeremiah Love and Aeneas Williams, or like I said, they have so many running backs. Jadarian Price. I'm going to forget a player, right? But I think those two in tandem are better than the three that Notre Dame have. Now, going into this matchup maybe a few weeks ago, I would have said, yeah, I'll take Notre Dame's offensive line every single time. They are strong. They reset the line of scrimmage. They're able to push guys off of the football. Against a Georgia front seven, they were able to get movement. But Penn State's offensive line is playing. So that's kind of, that one right there is kind of neutralized. Pass catchers for Penn State overall, do they have a Heisman contender to throw to? No, they don't. Now, Riley Leonard had 90 passing yards against that Georgia defense. Now, I know that is Georgia's defense, but still, they really relied on Jeremiah Love in that backfield with Riley Leonard as a dual threat quarterback. I think Jordan Faison is a reliable target. I think Mitchell Evans as well, but it's not like Penn State can't cover those players. I would take A.J. Harris more often than not against Faison. I would take a Tony Rojas, a Kobe King in coverage against a Mitchell Evans. So Notre Dame does have reliable targets, but Penn State's secondary isn't overmatched here. This isn't a mismatch at all. Abdul Carter's an important part of this, and we'll talk about him more in the final segment. Is he going to play? How effective will he be? What's the recovery? James Franklin's going to give us hopefully an update. Hopefully at least a usable update, right? We'll get an update, but hopefully it'll be something that actually tells us what we need to know going into the Orange Bowl. Stockton was a disadvantage to Georgia. Well, Carson Beck wasn't playing that well either. I don't know Georgia's quarterback situation too much, following them from afar, but they could still score the football. They almost came back and beat Alabama. They did score 40 plus points against Georgia Tech. So that offense wasn't completely awful, but there is a big drop off going from Carson Beck as a multi-year starter to Gunnar Stockton. I mean, they couldn't even use his legs, but that is also in part to Notre Dame's defense is top 5 objectively. Look at the statistics, look at the analytics. Notre Dame has a top 5 defense. Al Golden is doing wonders with that defense, and there's a lot of talent. I look at Notre Dame's secondary. If you're going to highlight any strength, okay, Penn State has a really good secondary with Jalen Reed, Zach Wheatley, and A.J. Harris. And I think Jalen Kimber and Zion Tracy have gotten better as the season's gone along. But Notre Dame's secondary, it is very, very good. One of the best in the country. We'll see who has the match. Per the eye test, it's pretty close, but I would not be surprised if I had to give that one to Notre Dame based on the way that they force turnovers. Penn State isn't forcing as many interceptions as a Notre Dame is. Notre Dame going into the Sugar Bowl had 18 interceptions. Penn State doesn't have that. And 53 passes defended to go along with 11 fumbles recovered. So this Notre Dame defense forces turnovers. Penn State, fortunately, doesn't give the football away very much, but Notre Dame can get its hands on the football. Wave the white flag, Penn State. It's going to be a brutal game. That is defeatist. Game hasn't even started. We only have just the initial opening spread, and it's not like it's 10 points. It's 1.5. It's 1.5. This is the big game moment for James Franklin. This is the big game moment. Franklin can put a lot of criticism to rest by defeating Notre Dame. Doesn't matter if it's by 1 point or 100. A 100-point victory would be awesome. But if James Franklin and Penn State are able to do this and get to the national title game, I don't care who's waiting on the other side. If that's Texas or that's Ohio State, truly, listen to the 1-0 mentality. It does not matter who you are facing. You have to get there first. But that would quiet a lot of criticism, a lot of media personalities that have been after James Franklin for the longest time, and I don't want to say deservedly so. I don't think that's right. But the criticism isn't unwarranted to an extent because Penn State hasn't racked up top 5. And it's hard to do. It is hard to do. Find me a coach, find me a program that is consistently defeating top 5 teams, top 10 teams left and right. It is a tall task. It is not easy to get to the national championship. But this Penn State team is built different. Drew Aller's playing his best football. Singleton and Allen are both healthy. Tyler Warren was a Heisman contender. This offensive line is playing its best football. Abdul Carter seems to be available, but the defensive line, Zane Durant, Devon J. Thomas, Denai Dennis Sutton, and then your backups are 4th, 5th, 6th-year guys. Smith Vilbert, Amin Vanover. This team was built for a national title run, and I hope that's what the everydayers remember. I have said this. I am not surprised that they are in the semifinal. It doesn't matter about Boise State and SMU. I said that Penn State could get to the national championship, and they can beat Notre Dame. They can get there. This isn't a joke. This is serious. That Penn State should be considered. I think they should be the 1.5-point favorite over Notre Dame. Personally, I think they are slightly better, but I wouldn't be surprised if Vegas and the odds makers are being hesitant with the availability of Abdul Carter. So let's pivot to that. Abdul Carter, does he make or break a Penn State victory against Notre Dame? Even if he's not 100%, if he's 50% limited, is that still enough for Penn State to defeat the Fighting Irish? Well, we'll talk about it more on the other side of this break. And today's episode is also brought to you by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions that you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? Now, that's definitely happened to me. I've had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money can make it easy for you to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place. Whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even your goals that you're going to want to hit in the new year, Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. One of the best features is the subscription tracker. You can use it to cancel services that you aren't using anymore, and you'll save a ton. And then there's the goals feature, where you can automatically set aside money for your future. And then there's no more stressing about budgeting every single month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That is rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Again, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Okay, Abdul Carter. I think that's kind of the biggest question mark that everybody is wondering about. And it does have a significant impact on Penn State versus Notre Dame. It absolutely does. KJ Winston was that superstar defender and why Penn State's defense never reached its true potential. This is still a top 10 group. Without KJ Winston, it would have been in the same category because I do think Notre Dame's defense collectively is better than Penn State's, or at least has shown that over the course of this season and to this point. It's a slight advantage. Not a big one, but slightly. Notre Dame's defense statistically and the eye test has been slightly better. Look, they force more turnovers. That it's okay to say. But Penn State now, if they want to continue to live up to that top 10 definition, Abdul Carter needs to be available. Tom Allen cannot do the same thing schematically without Abdul Carter. Carter lines up at right tackle, left tackle, over the center. You can drop him back as a quarterback spy, and there's not another player that you can do that with. You will not only get this, so yes, you are going to miss out on the pure pass rush production, but it's the schematics of it. Where Riley Leonard, how do you confuse him? How do you make his job tougher? How do you make his day more miserable? Abdul Carter needs to be able to wreak havoc defensively. And if he's not 100%, then it's definitely going to be a factor. But I will say this, I don't think that takes Penn State completely out of the game. It's why you're seeing the initial odds have Penn State as a 1 to 2 point underdog. This is 1 to 2 points we're talking about. That means that it's still 48% that Penn State still gets a victory in this. And like I said, initially, I do like Penn State in this game, but we're going to go through and have more research, and I'll have my official score prediction and everything else. But you're going to get a defensive struggle. And if you're going to get a defensive struggle, then that means you need Abdul Carter available if you are Penn State. I think he will play. This is the national semifinal. This is the Orange Bowl. Historic battle here, right? I talked about all the historical implications that would be on the line for a Penn State versus Notre Dame matchup. You wouldn't quite have that with Penn State versus Georgia, and that's fine. But here we are against the Fighting Irish, and Abdul Carter has already alluded to the fact that he's in the rejuvenation chamber, that he's going to make his way back, that he's going to be ready for this game, and he's going to do everything in his power to be available. Penn State doesn't necessarily need to play him as that full-time defensive end. You can use him on pass rushing downs. You can use him in coverage. The bright side of all of this, I never want to try to minimize an injury or anything like that because a player's health is obviously the most important thing, but I'm not trying to minimize what Abdul Carter, and we don't even know the extent of his injury. Is it a shoulder? Is it an elbow? It's an arm. It's an upper body injury, and he really wasn't putting a lot of pressure. He wasn't really moving his left arm that much. That's what we know based on the broadcast, based on the eye test. But for Abdul Carter, it's not a lower body injury, which means that you could use him more maybe at linebacker. And as I'm thinking it through, because you have Amin Vanover, because you have Smith Vilbert, because you have Denai Dennis Sutton, you have 3 other options for 2 defensive end positions. So maybe Abdul Carter won't always be that defensive end that can hit and take a punch from the left tackle or the right tackle every single given play and put his hand in the dirt. But what if you use him as a stand-up pass rusher on obvious pass rushing situations? What if you do run a 4-3 and have him be that off-ball spy? Do you notice that Tom Allen is not afraid to construct a completely new look defense? In that game against Boise State, to shut down Ashton Genty, they went with a 5-2 defensive look, and Abdul Carter was dancing all around the field, and he was lining up here. That was what they had to do to stop Ashton Genty. So at Penn State, if you know that Notre Dame likes to run the rock and the receivers aren't elite, sell out for it. Sell out for the fact and use Abdul Carter as that quarterback spy and make that his defined position as almost positionless. It's wherever, if your job is to disrupt the backfield. That doesn't mean that it has to be a 4-2-5 defensive look. You can create, as Tom Allen did, other defensive formations to go and stop and attack that game plan that Notre Dame's going to throw out there. You know that they're run first. They like to use the play action. They don't have these elite playmakers that can ad lib at that pass catcher spot. So sell out for stopping Riley Leonard and Jeremiah Love and force them to throw the football. Make Jordan Faison beat you. Make Bo Collins beat you. Make Mitchell Evans beat you in that passing game for Notre Dame. But Abdul Carter is the superstar on this defense. You don't win a lot of games without him. Penn State was able to without a player like him. But Penn State still has so many players they're starting to reach that superstar caliber. AJ Harris, I think, is so close to becoming a superstar type of player. Saw it in the Big Ten championship, and he didn't really need to be that against Boise State and SMU. But in those games, in that game that mattered most against Oregon at the time in the Big Ten championship, he was starting to become a superstar type of playmaker. Evan Stewart did not have a single catch. When he shadowed Tez Johnson, did not have a single catch. Jalen Reed, Zach Wheatley, the linebackers are getting better. Tony Rojas, and then as I mentioned, all the depth along the line of scrimmage for the defensive line. They can recover from Abdul Carter not being 100%, but you definitely need Abdul Carter out there for this game. Penn State still has a fighter's chance. Let's say Abdul Carter was not in this game. Penn State could get by against a Notre Dame without him. It's not going to be easy. And I'm not saying that, I would necessarily pick them, that would be my prediction, but it wouldn't be, oh, well, Notre Dame's now going to win 27-10. That's not it at all. If Abdul Carter, whether or not he plays, Penn State is still has a fighter's chance, and this would still be a very close game one way or another, whether it's a win or a loss. But of course, everyone cares about a win. Let's finish up with the comments section and catch back up with all of you as we wrap it up here on just live edition, first initial thoughts on Penn State versus Notre Dame. See if I can recover my spot, because I had it and then I scroll, move away from it here on the side. Oh, Notre Dame's defense will punish Drew Aller. I'll tell you what, if Penn State doesn't get its blitz protections picked up, or if they don't anchor that down, then that will be an issue. Notre Dame gets organic pressure defensively, and then they have a secondary that can cover for long periods of time. So if the blitz doesn't get home, the front four and the blitz package, they can trust those DBs in the back to make sure that they are able to stay with the wide receivers and Tyler Warren, pass catchers. Do you think Penn State runs a similar defense against Notre Dame as they did against Boise, since Leonard only passed for 90 yards? Absolutely. The emphasis is going to be on stacking the box and trusting AJ Harris, Jalen Kimber, Zion Tracy, or Jalen Reed or Zach Wheatley. If they're asked, Zach Wheatley's mainly the free safety, but Jalen Reed is actively down in the box. They're going to ask those guys to be in man-to-man coverage or cover 3, which takes away one side of the field. They're going to ask them to be in one-on-one responsibilities and focus on stopping Jeremiah Love, or again, Jadarian Price or Aeneas Williams, that backfield of Riley Leonard and a talented running back. That is going to be the focus. And that's how Notre Dame likes to win. They want to out-physical you, control the time of possession, and keep your defense on the field for long periods of time. Boise State does that too, but not as effectively as Notre Dame does, because they have the quarterback, because they have the coordinators, right? Notre Dame, I don't want to say is just a better version of Boise State. That's not necessarily it, but they do think they have similar types of blueprints, but Ashton Genty is not, they don't use him the same way that they use Jeremiah Love. Riley Leonard is utilized different than Maddox Madsen, and that's what makes Notre Dame better. There's these wrinkles within Notre Dame's system that makes them a top 4 team. Here we are in the semifinals. Notre Dame under 100 passing yards and 150 rushing yards. They are steady and opportunistic. Let the enemy defeat itself, right? You don't have to force yourself to make mistakes. That's what I always commend Drew Aller for that. Riley Leonard does the same thing. You don't need to force a pass when you're up. When you're up 23-10 like that, run the rock and continue to get physical yards and keep that opposing offense on the sideline. Because when Penn State's offense gets hot, it gets hot. They can go toe-to-toe with anybody. They can get into a shootout. And I wonder if Notre Dame's offense can too. I don't know that for a fact. I don't know if Notre Dame's offense, and that's why as I start to think through this matchup, how many ways can Penn State win this game? How many ways can Notre Dame win this game? And at least initially, I think that there are more ways that Penn State can win this game as opposed to Notre Dame. Can Riley Leonard get into a shootout with Drew Aller? Easier said than done, because this is a top 5 and a top 10 defense respectively for Notre Dame and Penn State. But if it did break that way, could it happen if Andy Kotelnicki and Penn State's offense get hot? I think Penn State has a chance to beat Notre Dame. Just a chance. I think it's 50-50 with me slightly leaning Penn State at this point in time. I'm really looking forward to this matchup. It's going to be a gritty game won by who wants it more. Yeah, if it's going to be a team, whoever makes the least amount of mistakes, and that's the way Notre Dame and Georgia unfolded. But that's opportunistic. I like that. I like that comment from earlier. Opportunistic is the right word. This, at least the way it's projecting right now, this is about a 23 to 24, 23 type of game. 2017, somewhere in that neighborhood. It might be decided by a field goal, and I would dunk. I planned on dunking on Notre Dame special teams, but Mitch Jeter, who is the place kicker for Notre Dame, has really settled in. He was not good going into the postseason. He has really settled in as a place kicker. That would have been an advantage with Ryan Barker over Mitch Jeter. We are going to keep winning. 27-20, my Nittany Lions going to the national title against the Buckeyes. Hopefully a different result, though. Absolutely. Yeah, and is Ohio State that clear-cut team that's going to make it on the other side? Most likely. Yeah. Texas, they ran away against Clemson. Struggled a bit against Arizona State. Honestly, if that targeting call goes a different way, I don't know. Arizona State looked like it belonged. Tired of the hypothetical matchups. I really am. I think to an extent, I'm guilty of it too, because you want to try to use every bit of evidence to make a comparison, but for comparison's sake, not justification. Results matter. Games matter. So Vegas would say, the odds would say, I don't like any of that. For the sake of comparison and for the sake of matchups, you absolutely have to speak in hypotheticals. But you can't use hypotheticals as justification to say one team is better than the other, because that's clearly not the case. Arizona State looked like a top 4 team, and that was the wrong call. That was the wrong call in that no targeting. They probably would have won against Texas. And then in Ohio State and Arizona State, well, again, they shouldn't have beat Texas, but they would have been there. The referees got it wrong in the moment. I don't even know how that happens, because it's not like that wasn't an unreviewable play. That is reviewed to a T, and they still got it wrong. But whatever, Texas moves on. Quinn Ewers has a $6 million offer on the table from some other school. I don't think he plays like a $6 million college quarterback, but I'm a podcast host and he's a millionaire, so maybe I shouldn't throw stones in a glass house, right? Is their running back going to be healthy? Yes, Jeremiah Love did come out of the game against Georgia. If he isn't, that is a significant blow, especially with the fact that Notre Dame is dealing with other injuries to key players. It's not so much about the quantity, but it's more about the quality of players that are missing in this case. And for Notre Dame, that is a big deal, because Jeremiah Love is an all-star. Like he is a future NFL running back. And it's not that Jadarian Price and Aeneas Williams aren't that. They trust them at this point in time. So there's not a significant drop-off, but you're going from superstar running back who could be the workhorse, the bell cow, to guys that split time and guys that haven't been asked to do a full workload for the ground game. Penn State's offensive line needs to hold up against Notre Dame's pass rush. If Aller has some time, they can stay balanced. I like our chances. I don't see Leonard being able to throw on us. Absolutely. And it's going to come down to, I know play calling got a lot of criticism. I actually have an episode to follow that up. Just kind of some more takeaways from Penn State versus Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl. And it was recorded. It was in fact recorded before the Sugar Bowl here against Notre Dame and Georgia. So not a lot to talk about in that episode, but Riley Leonard and Notre Dame's passing attack might not be able to if Penn State goes up tempo, and easier said than done, is able to score early and Notre Dame's playing from behind. Then what? We've seen Notre Dame. Now, I know that they've scored points. Hey, they scored 49 against USC. It's not the same USC team. Let me just tell you that. That's not the exact same USC team. They can put up points, but that came behind Riley Leonard as a dual threat quarterback. Jeremiah Love controlling the pace of the game, play action. What happens when it's just backyard football? Maybe Penn State wants to turn it into a shootout because you have Tyler Warren. You have the best pure offensive playmaker in the game in Tyler Warren, and a better passer to go along with him in Drew Aller. That might be the difference. It might be on the shoulders of Tyler Warren, Drew Aller, and Andy Kotelnicki to push this one across the finish line to get to the national championship game. I see all the comments, and I really wish I could get to everybody. I wish I could, but I appreciate the support first and foremost. Thank you so much for spending the holiday with me over New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, and now January 2nd. It means a lot. Thank you so much for checking out the live show. We are going to do more of these. We're going to have live reactions, live analysis, of course, all your regular daily podcasts to talk about not only Penn State football, Penn State basketball, Penn State wrestling, so much more here on the show. Please subscribe if you're new to the channel here on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave a like on this episode, share it with friends and family. Happy New Year again. It's not afraid to say it again here on January 2nd. Happy New Year. Thank you so much for checking out this live show, and we're going to talk to you again very soon here on Locked On Nittany Lions.